When you get a new card game, how much attention do you actually pay to the cards themselves? Is it just the art style, or do you go deeper into the more intricacies of the card? Well, today we're going to be taking a look at different card styles to see what's good, what's bad, what we like, what we don't like, and what we can take to put in our own homemade TCGs. And we're going to be starting off with this card. Now, take the time to look at this card and then let me know in the comments section if you picked up on this as well. So you may have noticed that the values of the cards are on the right hand side of the card. Now, this normally isn't the correct format to use because when you hold cards in your hand, normally the right side is covered up. Now, this doesn't really ruin the aesthetics of the card. I mean, the card looks beautiful, everything looks well balanced. All I would suggest is that we mirror that so the stats are on the opposite side. This just adds a small quality of life feature for your players that they probably won't even notice. But it is nice to not have to be picking out every individual card just to read all of the stats to then put it back in the hand because you didn't need that card. Now, overlaying is something that you can do with your cards as well, and this one does not take the mick with it. You know, it does it a little bit, but it doesn't go overboard, and I'll show you what I mean. So with these stats here, just having them float above the picture frame like this is fantastic. So we've got hit points, durability, vulnerability, and speed. So we've got all the little symbols overlaid on top of the large image here, but then we also have the digits, the numbers overlaid on top of the symbols. So it seems more three-dimensional for, you know, what would be a boring 2D card. Now, as an extra, I also really like this little moon in the bottom left corner here, just overlaying on top of the stats here. It's not getting in the way of any writing, it's not intruding on any way, but it is just adding a little bit more depth to the cards. Now, if you are designing your own TCG and you're finding that your images are just looking a bit flat, I would recommend just trying to include a little bit of this into your card game, especially if it is important information like these here. The way they just pop out onto the screen just by having that little bit of an overlay, it just makes a world of difference that your players will appreciate. Now, what I rarely see from modern card designs these days is just plain square boxes. And this is about as close as we are going to get to that today, I think. So if we take a look at this, right, we've got a nice box here, but even so, they're adding a little bit of flair to the corners. You know, we've got the little bevel, and then we've got this little bit of decoration here and here. So that is great. I love it. Obviously, it ties into the back as well. So it is a good aesthetic to have on both sides. You've got that continuity. It's very nice. Players will appreciate the consistency in design that way. But let's think about it for a minute. Cards are rectangles. It is easy to fit rectangles into rectangles. That's why we have to be a little bit creative with our designs just to help them look a little bit different from the other cards. Now, you could say because everybody is trying to look different, then everything just ends up looking the same. And there is a grain of truth to that. And maybe this is why this card actually stood out to me, because it is close to the default shape for trading card games. It actually caught my interest, but just by adding a small bit of flair, I'm not talking about a lot here, it's just broke it up a little bit more. You don't have to say that, oh, my text box is going to be triangles and my card art is going to be a hexagon. You know, you don't have to go as crazy as that. Experiment. See if that actually works for you, but don't be afraid to just go square and add a little bit of decal around it. So looking at this card is also pretty close to a square shape for the card art. What they've done to make it a little bit different is they've added a little bit of a downwards curve around the outsides here. Also, we've got the overlays on top. This helps break up that boring square. So it works. So it's a square, but it isn't. So now you can see how you can be a bit more creative with a basic shape. But what I wanted to point out about this card and why it made it onto my list noticed is this heart shape. Now, I always find that the heart shape for me is distracting. I always think associate more with love than life, so it does take away a little bit when I see it in game design. But this card art has the heart just slightly laid on its side here in its own style, and I like that. I feel like it has that degree of separation now where I can associate it more with life. And the point that I want to make is sometimes if you don't like a certain design, you don't have to scrap the whole design and start from the beginning. Lead with players' preconceptions. You know, life equals heart symbols. We understand that as players. We understand. Nobody needs to tell me that that number 4 represents life. And speaking of basic generic shapes, let's talk about this coffin shape that they've put on a vampire card game. Aesthetically, it fits very well. Now, I am not saying to cut up your cards into coffin shapes if you're designing your own TCG. What I am saying is, how can you associate basic shapes like this into your TCG that actually relate to the theme of your game? Now, I know this seems obvious, but pick shields for defense, swords for attacking. There isn't any harm in putting those in your game. Just because they've been done in others doesn't mean that they're overdone. It means that they're so blaringly obvious that the players don't have a choice but to understand what you mean. Here, I'm going to use one for example. So I'm going to make a card. I'm going to draw this out, right? And with this symbol, I think you know what I'm going to ask next of you. So if you figured that symbol out, well done. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. Thank you very much. Now, this isn't a card design, but take a look at how simple this line work is and how much detail it appears to have. That's because our brains like to fill in the gaps. So all they've done is added a few little etchings here and here, so it tells you that the book is tired, you know, it's faded, and it's an old leathery type of book. Then we've got a little bit of design for the corners here as well, which is very pretty. And then we've got the spine, right? But look at the whole thing together. There isn't that much design in it at all. There isn't color, there isn't shading. It is just basic line work. So it shows what you can do with very basic artistic skills. Now, this card for me has too much going on. It's starting to look like a pool table because you've got something going on in almost every corner, barring one, and then something in the middle 2 pockets as well. You could literally pocket this like a pool table. Now, the good thing is I like cards with certain levels of complexity, and this one looks like it would engage me to a point. But what I don't see the point is why all of these stats have to be spread out across the whole card. Why do I have to look from here to here to here to here when I could have just had everything down in a row or everything across the board? But if we just want to focus on the monster art itself, beautiful art. I really appreciate it. I love the style that they're going for here. It's fantastic card. I just find that everything else just feels a little bit too crowded for my liking. Now, this card reinforces the previous idea of shapes on the card. So we take a look at the card art. It's a pretty square design, but then they just cut off one corner. It shows that you don't have to do much to break away from the norm. You know, just one corner. We'll just take that off. There we go. It's a little bit different. And then once again, the heart design, they've added a little bit extra to the heart design, so it isn't just a generic heart symbol. They are playing off of players' preconceptions of what it is. We know that's their life. It is just a basic heart, but we're just going to add a little bit more so you know that it's our game. You know it's our style. And then font as well. So we've got Mr. Ghost Krill right here. Now, this is very readable font, but we can still see that they're trying to be a bit fun and a bit wacky with it. If you're picking a font for your TCG, yes, you could pick something very cool and very aesthetically pleasing, but it can also be hard to read. You gotta remember, the cards, they end up being quite small, which means the writings become very, very small. So make sure that you have something that is still clear to read, still pick something thematic, something that fits well. Don't be afraid to just go plain though. Practicality is better. We need to make sure that players can actually read your cards or nobody will play your game. Okay, so thank you very much for watching up to this point. I am going to finish off with this one last card, and it is a little bit of a subtle but important feature of putting into your game. Now, when we're looking at this Duel Masters card, we can see the cost of the card and we can see the attack of the card here. So we've got 1,000 and we've got 4. These two numbers are massively different numbers. Now, why would a game design two things with massively different numbers? Why not just have a 1 instead of 1,000 if 1,000 is the lowest number? Well, that is because when we take a look at card effects and they read 1000, our brains will automatically scan that and we will know before even reading the entire effect that it is something to do with affecting the power level of cards. The same with the basic number. If we just scan and we see the number 4, we know that it will affect a card by the playing cost of the card. This means that we can scan through cards a lot faster as players. It is another subtle quality of life that you may not have even considered. Now, you probably don't need to go as far as doing 1,000, but it does help break things up. You can go into the hundreds, you can go into the tens even. But the 1,000 is such a large difference of a number that level of separation just helps our brains scan faster when we're looking for maneuvers or looking to build new decks. But it is just another subtle quality of life that maybe you should add to your own TCG. I've been James. This has been TCG R&D. I've had a good time. I hope you have as well. And I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.